Welcome to Team Perry's Step Out of Line podcast, featuring co-hosts Perry and Lori Finkelstein. Together, they explore, meet, and share inspirational stories with guests who have made a positive impact in today's world. This podcast resonates with our hope to make this world a better place one step at a time through love, acceptance, and uplifting conversations.
I'm the only Gafni in my family, actually. I went back to the original family name. Actually, my name change became finalized while I was living in Australia in 1996. When I tell you the name I grew up with, every time I tell people, they go, oh, I understand. My last name was Shmuloff, and so it was Samuel's son. So like my father's family, when they were crossing borders, they said, what's your father's name? And they would say Samuel. Okay, so you're Samuel's son, or Shmuel off. But my father always said to me, our real family name was Gafni. It just became Shmuloff, and we all just sort of accepted it. So I said, would it bother you if I went back to Gafni, since that's our real family name? And I think it sounds nicer. And he had no problem with it. If he'd had a problem with it, I probably wouldn't have changed it. But he was like, no, it's the real name. I would be happy if you'd changed it. So I did, and it takes a few months until it's finalized and all that. And I remember I had just come back from Australia. I was in the car with my father, and I had the name change papers with me. He had handed me the envelope, and I said, wow, I can't believe I actually changed my name, and now I'm Ramy Gafni. And he said, actually, I think the name was Geffen. He'd always said Gafni until my name was changed.
Oh my God, well.
Geffen. I'm like, really? I had a bout with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was just as my career had taken off. I had a great job at a Fifth Avenue salon, and I was becoming well known and getting press and working on celebrities, and everything was going great in my career. And I was suddenly diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I went through 5 months of chemo and went to work. I took one sick day in 5 months during chemo. I was very driven to keep as much normalcy in my life as possible. And, I was young and strong and, able to do it. Just as I finished chemo and I was about to start a month of daily radiation, the salon fired me, telling me, you're not the pretty boy we hired. I took my things and I went home. Another top salon reached out to me. They said, oh, we hear you're leaving them. Come work for us. And I thought, thank God, I need my health insurance. I need an income. And when I went to meet with them, I was still, I'd finished chemo, but I looked like I was in chemo. I was still bald and, I looked like I was going through something. And when they saw me, they said, oh, we're not looking to hire right now. They were like, why do you look like this? I said, well, I just finished 5 months of chemo. The cancer is technically gone. I'm good to go. And they were very nervous and they were like, well, we're not looking to hire right now. And this was after they reached out to me. I didn't reach out to them. And I realized no one was going to hire me while I looked like a cancer patient. So I did a mailing to my clients that I was available privately, and I set up my apartment into a little, beauty studio. And I started working for myself, truly out of necessity. And it took off. I was very fortunate. I had gotten some great press before leaving the salon, and that led to more press. And I was, really busy. It was great. It wasn't like a decision I made consciously. I felt like I had no choice. I had to go into business for myself. A year later, I launched my cosmetics at Bergdorf Goodman. And just as I got into Bergdorf, the salon that fired me went out of business. And that was very karmic and very well, now what's my motivation?
Right.
At the time I was thinking, I'll show them what a mistake they made. And that was 26 years ago. And so that was one time where I think I took my lemons and I made lemonade. I didn't let it get the best of me. And I thought that was going to be my defining moment in life. That was the big thing. The cross that I had to bear was that I went through cancer. And then about 9 years later, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And that's been a constant struggle, still is. I go through periods where it's going very well, other times when it's not going well, but it's a constant battle. And then about 9 years ago, I was run over and nearly killed by a moped and had a very bad head trauma. That was probably the worst thing I've been through, worse than cancer. Like that one, like I'm lucky to be alive. After that, I had a fractured skull, bleeding in the brain, concussion. It was a very bad hit. I was unconscious for 10 days. It was very bad. That was the first thing that happened to me where I kind of said, WTF, like, what the heck? I'm already evolved. I'm already a woke person. I've already had my crosses to bear. Go run over someone who needs a wake-up call.
Right.
Why are you bothering me? I'm already like woke. That was the one thing, even now, 9 years later, I'm still kind of like, well, what was the lesson I was supposed to get from that? I look back at having had cancer and I'm like, well, it catapulted my career and my business. The way things played out, it was very stressful at the time. But had that not happened, I wouldn't have had a great brand, for all these years. And, I'd be working for someone else most likely. The diabetes, I'm like, well, I'm managing it. It's okay. But then getting run over, I was like, seriously, is someone out to get me? Like, what is this all about? The only answer I've come up with is that I think I'm supposed to be having more fun in life. And because I think I had become a little bit of a workaholic and my mother was very sick for many years and, I was helping care for her. So that took up, like, I didn't want to go on vacation because I needed to be here for my mom. So I thought maybe the lesson is you have to make time to enjoy your life and so on, which is easier said than done. Like, you want, like, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to start going on more vacations and having more fun. And it's actually more difficult to do. It used to be easier when I was younger, I guess, and more footloose and fancy free. But now it's just like, I don't plan vacations like I used to. I used to go twice a year, no matter what. So I'm trying to get back to that. Those were like 3 incidents in my life, I would say, the 3 big things that I've been through, the 3 tortures that I carry. I started volunteering with cancer patients while I was still in treatment, actually. And so it's been many years of volunteering, doing beauty classes, makeup lessons for people in treatment. That always gave purpose to what I went through. I was like, okay, so I had this rough year, but so much good has come from it. It turned the negative into a positive in a way, and I'm here to complain about it, so it's okay. Again, the only thing, the accident was a little more like, I guess it just teaches you that you never know, from one day to the next. Again, I'm lucky to be alive. It could have gone a whole other way. And so it makes you appreciate life, that I'm here still to complain about
Right.
everything.
We have multiple things also that every time something else hits, like Perry, I already have muscular dystrophy. She went deaf in one ear at the age of 20. I also constantly question, why do you have to have it? Myself also, I have multiple, like why one thing after another? Isn't one thing enough? I might have even turned away from religion because I don't think, there's an answer for everything. There's a reason for anything.
Right.
I don't know if there's a reason for anything.
It makes you feel like maybe there isn't some big presence up in the heavens watching over us and, protecting us. So maybe nobody's really watching, and it makes you question it. My mother had cancer when she was 29. She had Hodgkin's disease, which is today the most survivable cancer, but this was around 1974, and she was considered terminal, actually, at age 29. And in a last-ditch effort to save her life, they decided to hospitalize her and do 3 months of full body radiation. Not like when I had radiation, it was a sophisticated zap, little zap right where the cancer had been. But with her, they literally from head to toe cooked her with radiation for 3 months. And it killed the cancer. And they told my father that she had a 50-50 chance, of survival, but it was the only option. So she survived, and she actually outlived the terminal diagnosis by 43 years. So she had a life. I had a mother. My father had a wife, but she was good from age like 30 to 60. And then starting at age 60, one thing after another. And all of it was because she had gone through so much radiation. So she
Wow.
had full body neuropathy, which led to some, falls. One fall was very catastrophic, return of the cancer, other cancers. And she had to have brain surgery. She had to have her aortic valve replaced in her heart. Like it was one thing after another. And every time she would survive and everything was good for 1 second, and then she'd get knocked down by something else. And I even remember doctors looking at her medical record saying this was all one person. It's like so many things for one person to endure. It's funny, people will say to me that, oh, you've been through so much. And I'm like, no, I haven't. I don't, if I compare myself to my mom, I haven't been through so much. I've been through, a couple of things, but my mom really went through it, and her will to live was so strong. And she was really a great example. She was never defeated by it. And she lived to be 73, and she was supposed to die at 30.
From the ages of 30 to 60, when she was literally your mom and taking care of you as a little kid growing up, was she a pessimist? Was she an optimist?
No, very optimistic. I get my optimism from her. My father and my sister are the pessimists in the family. I was blessed with my mother's disposition, and she was always cheery, always with a smile on her face. It's funny now, my father is 87 and has Alzheimer's and dementia, and the dementia is getting pretty bad. And it's a lot to deal with, to care for him and make sure he's taken care of. And it's just much more difficult because, he always was a little curmudgeon-y, even at his best. And with dementia, it's even worse. With my mother, you didn't mind doing for her because she was such a pleasure. You would just do anything for her. Like, it didn't feel like an obligation or a chore. Yet she had a wonderful outlook, and her will to live was very strong. Her love of her family was very strong. Like, she wanted to be here with us, for us. I didn't realize how ill she was until after she passed, and my father gave me her medical records, kind of, should we keep these? What do we do with this? And I looked through it, and I couldn't believe for many, many years, she was much sicker than I ever knew. It didn't show, like she didn't show it to us. She seemed to me most of those years very able-bodied and, completely fine. She worked for me for years. I mean, I knew she had some health issues, but I didn't realize the magnitude of it.
When you were very ill, who got you through that? Were your parents able to help you? Your sister there?
They offered. I'm also very independent. I remember when I was going through chemo, for example, again, going to work every day. It's cumulative, the chemo. Like, as you go through the months of it, it gets worse and worse, like more fatigue. And so I remember, my mom would call me and she would be like, do you need anything? Do you want me to come over? Do you want me to send your father? And I felt like it would be more taxing to have someone standing over me saying, do you want a drink of water? Are you hungry? Do you want, I'm fine. If I need you, I'll call you. But like it gave me peace of mind that I could call if I needed help, but I never felt like I needed the help. My sister came over once or twice and made me dinner, and I was like, am I dying? Like, do you know something that I don't know?
Right.
Why are you washing my dishes? Is everything okay? Because it was kind of out of character for her. I was very independent, and I was also very optimistic that I was going to be okay. Because at that point, when I went through it, my mother was still fine. Like, she had gone through it, years earlier. When I had it, I was 32, so she would have been 52. So she was still doing great. Like, as far as we knew, she went through cancer, she got rid of it and got on with her life and was fine at that point. And that was my role model. And I remember actually when the oncologist finally called me in after, they had the biopsy results and everything, and he brought me in to discuss the treatment plan. And there was some question about, they weren't sure which type of cancer I had, if it was Hodgkin's disease like my mother or non-Hodgkin's. So I'd met with him like a couple of weeks earlier, and I asked him, am I going to lose my hair? And he said, well, it depends. If it's Hodgkin's, you won't lose your hair. It might thin a little, but it won't be noticeable. And if it's non-Hodgkin's, you're going to be completely hairless for like 6 months. So it was now a couple of weeks later, he brought me in to discuss the treatment plan and tell me what the diagnosis was. And he told me it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he went through the whole treatment plan. And he said, do you have any questions? And I said, am I going to lose my hair? And the doctor started laughing, and I'm like, why is that funny? And he said, most people want to know if it's life threatening. And I was like, yeah, just tell me about the hair. I'd already decided not now and not from this. Like, this is not going to be the thing that does me in.
Right.
Like, I'd already made that decision.
I mean, you were fired from your first job because you weren't Mr. GQ like you are now. Like, immediately when you said that, what were you thinking? Lawyer up.
And it was illegal even then, by the way. I did actually lawyer up. It was a very open and shut case, and they had tried to not give me a severance pay even. You know, when people say it wasn't about the money, it's the principle that's concerning me. And in that case, it was really true for me. It wasn't about money. It was about, I was so mad.
Right.
They fired me. I wanted also to take a stand so that the next person who's sick, if I hit them where they live a little bit, they'll treat the next person better than they treated me. That was what I was thinking. And I'd already started like my cosmetic line at that point. I remember my lawyer, he was trademarking like Ramy Beauty Therapy, you know, the brand name. And he said, I've never had that before, where I had, you know, I was representing someone who was also like starting their business already instead of just waiting around for a payday. And I remember he was very impressed by that. I did end up getting a severance pay from them. We had a mediation, and they were actually really crummy every step of the way. They kept calling me and leaving voicemails. The owners of the salon kept saying, you know, call us, we want to discuss this. My partner and I want to make this go away. And I said to my lawyer, what should I do? I'm not answering their calls. And he said, next time they call, answer the call and tell them we want this much money, you know, to make it all go away. That's what I did. And the guy was very nice and was like, well, let me speak to my partner. I'll call you back tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And they never called me back to this day. We had filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, and they really prioritized my case because here I was in middle of cancer treatment. Like, I'm not saying, oh, they fired me because I'm Jewish. It's like, clearly I'm a cancer patient, clearly just lost my job. So they really prioritized the case, and they gave us, each side, they gave us 3 dates for a mediation. And you had to pick the date that worked for you. And one of those dates would overlap, and that would be the day of your mediation. So we chose our dates, and we were waiting for the other side to choose their dates. And this is when they're calling me. And so instead of calling me back, they called the EEOC and they said, we can't have a mediation with Ramy because he called us trying to blackmail us, like demanding money. And I was like, wow, just when you think someone couldn't be more evil than firing you while you're sick. And I had saved all of their messages that were date and time stamped, and all the messages were them begging me to call. So I told my lawyer, said, what do you want me to tell the lady at the EEOC? I said, you tell her to tell them that I saved all their messages begging me to call and to cut the crap. And that's what she did. And then the next thing we knew, you know, they realized we had to have the mediation. So we did. And, you know, they got off cheap. Again, for me, it was about taking a stand and saying this was not okay.
So you're a very principled person.
I think so. I try to do the right thing. I expect the same from others.
Is that why you got into the career in the first place? Because you know it's not just I'm going to cut and style your hair and make you beautiful. You know it's a lot more than that. It goes very deep.
That first job, the salon that kind of put me on the map, actually, it was a real education for me because it was a real snake pit. You know, the place. I mean, you have these sort of, it's almost cliche, these kind of bitchy stylists working there. And I was the only makeup artist working there. I was makeup and eyebrows, but I'm dealing with hair colorists, hair stylists, and many of them were nice, many of them not so nice, but they didn't seem to have any love for their clients. You know, it was like they almost hated them, it seemed sometimes. One time I had a woman who came for a makeup lesson, and she was not classically beautiful. She looked like a little bit like a witch. Like her features, she just looked like a witch. And I remember one of the bitchy stylists said to me, oh, good luck with the makeup job there. You know, like good luck doing her makeup. And I remember, you know, when I was new, I was like a green, inexperienced makeup artist. And I'm kind of looking at her going, what am I going to do? You know, like I want to do right by her, but what do I do? It is a little more challenging. I told myself, you know what, just do the same thing you would do on anybody else. And that's what I did. And it turned out great. And it was so good that that bitchy stylist came up to me at the end of the day. He said, what he actually said was, I never meant to tell you, you did a very good job on that client. And then he said, no, I mean, I meant to tell you that you did a very good job. And I'm like, no, I think you never meant to tell me was correct. I always say I fall in love with every face that I work on. And it's true. It's like you have to find the positive. And it's the same equation, whether it's a housewife from Kansas or a supermodel or a famous actress. Every single human being has the same, it's an equation. There are things you want to draw attention away from, and there are things you want to play up. And it's the same for literally every person on the planet. And I've learned that lesson early on. It's such a rewarding feeling when you hand them the mirror and they're wowed by they love how they look. I still deal with a lot of cancer patients. Now I also do microblading. It's the temporary tattooing of eyebrows. And I get clients that either their eyebrows never came back after treatment, even years later. So they now come in for microblading. Some people are still in treatment, and with their doctor's permission, we can do the microblading, while they're in chemo. I get people, they start crying afterwards. They're like, that they said, I didn't have eyebrows for 4 years. I never thought I would have my eyebrows again. I think to the person, it represents, it was part of their cancer was that they don't have eyebrows anymore.
Right.
And now there's a solution, and it looks good and it looks natural, and it's so rewarding. It's just such a good feeling that you're able to do that for someone. It's such a superficial industry in general. So if you can sort of harness it and do something that really makes a change for someone, a positive change, it's very rewarding.
When you were younger, you envisioned the career for yourself, or did you want to do something totally different?
I'm laughing because I feel like I got a very late start at this career. It wasn't that late now in hindsight, but at the time, I always felt like I was getting a late start because I graduated college with a communications degree, and I moved right into Manhattan. And I was very entrepreneurial. I don't know, I just always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And I started a business, and I always made a living, but then I would get bored. I was like, no, this is not what I'm meant to be doing. And I would start a different business. I don't think someone today, like moving into Manhattan at age 22, could do what I did, 30 years ago. It just wouldn't be and I never had a roommate. I always supported myself, but I was very entrepreneurial. And what started happening was, every time I ran into people I knew, they would say, oh, Ramy, what are you doing now? So, because I was always switching things up. And at the time, when you're in your 20s, I felt like they were counting my failures. Oh, you're not doing that anymore? And so what are you doing now? And I was self-conscious about it. So I decided maybe if I go to law school, all of my wheeling and dealing falls under the umbrella of being a lawyer. That's all people need to know, is that I'm a lawyer. They don't need to know about every business I have going on. So I applied to law school, and I was thinking of veterinary school also because I love animals. I was working at the Animal Medical Center as a clinic aide, sort of see if I liked it, like working with animals. And while I was there and considering veterinary school, I got accepted to law school. And I remember I was really upset that I was accepted because I was like, oh no, now I have to try this, because otherwise I'll always wonder. I remember I was like, in my late 20s, and my mom was like, you're not getting any younger. And at that point, I also really wanted to leave New York. I blamed all my issues, all my problems on New York City. And I wanted to get out of New York. And I thought, well, if I'm a lawyer, I can go live in Europe and be an international lawyer. Completely the wrong reasons to go to law school. But I moved back home to my parents because they lived near the law school, which was also an adjustment after living on my own for 7 years. And I went to law school for a year, and I did very well academically, but I knew this is not for me. In my soul, I knew. But the problem is I'm doing well. So everyone's like, well, you're doing great. So just get the degree and then decide what you want to do. I was afraid I would be, drowning in debt if I stayed. because I had to take out loans for law school. And I would have to then be a lawyer in order to pay off the law school loans. The smartest thing I did actually was the 1 year that I was in law school, it cleaned out all the money I'd accumulated in 7 years and also $30,000 in law school loans. I had a year to change my mind and go back to law school, but I knew I was never going back. In my soul, I knew I was never going back. So I stayed living with my parents. I worked 2 jobs, and I was determined to pay off the law school loans before it accrued any interest. They give you 6 months. And I managed to pay it off in full. I was like $1,000 short. I borrowed it from my parents and I paid them back a month later, but I paid it off in full. They did not make an extra penny off of me. And then I sold all my things and I moved to Australia. I wanted to get out of New York, and I felt like they're really nice in Australia and they speak English. It was a wonderful experience. And while I was there and away from my friends and my family and everyone's opinions, I really gave thought to what can I do for a career that I would enjoy waking up every day and going to work. What really would excite me? And I was embarrassed that it was the beauty industry. I thought it's sort of like coming out of the closet, to say, oh, I'm going to be a makeup artist,
Right.
like nice Jewish parents. Like, yes, I'm not going back to law school, but I'm going to be a makeup artist. I remember I was afraid to tell them, so I wrote them a letter. Old school. Wrote them a letter. And then when I spoke to them, they had made the executive decision to be supportive. They were like, oh, why didn't you think of it sooner? You'd be great at it. Once I had their support, I full throttle pursued it in Sydney, Australia. And I went to 2 different beauty schools simultaneously. I ended up apprenticing a well-known makeup artist there. And he told me what to do when I come back to New York to jumpstart my career. And I turned 30 while I was in Australia. And I came back, and within 6 months, I was back living in Manhattan. Like, I went home, I'd spent all my money in my travels, moved back home to my parents, God bless them. I figured I'd be there for at least a year. Within 6 months, I was already back living in Manhattan independently, and my career was going great and never looked back.
You seem like an extremely driven person, and Perry's the exact same way. And it's very hard in some ways to parent her, but very easy as well. Because they don't really need you, these kind of people. Like, she doesn't need me.
The reason why I'm like that is that because of everything I've gone through and the innocent way, I don't know. But I always wanted a sense of control. Like, I never had control over
Right.
anything. Health issues, you can't control your health, you can't control anything that goes on.
Life happens.
Right. Knowing that I can be driven and do something gives me a sense of like, okay, like I can do this. I'm in control, like this is my life. As opposed to the girl who is medically fragile and in a wheelchair and, has all these medical things going on. I don't have to do that way. I can just focus on what I want to focus on, and that makes me feel like I can live my life a little bit.
Right.
I always say, like, anytime I have like a problem or something bad happens, I always go, well, it's not cancer. That gets me through things. It's funny because people tell me I'm driven, and I don't feel particularly driven, but I do say what I am is I'm a worker bee. I'm I'm busy, busy, busy. People ask me, like, what would you do if you ever like sold your company or, or retired from it? I said, honestly, I thought about it and I was like, I would probably start another business because I think I would get restless. I would get like bored, and I would just want, like, I always feel like I need to be doing something.
So do you have a brick and mortar shop, or are you doing like online sales?
I had a brick and mortar. It was called Ramy Spa for 12 years here in Manhattan on 31st between Park and Madison. And before that, I'd always worked, since going to work for myself, I always had like a setup in my home, wherever that was. And then I opened the commercial space and I actually lived in the back. I had an apartment in the back, and everyone kept telling me I have to separate my home and my work. So I got an apartment on 13th Street, and I would have 20-minute walk to and from. And what I discovered was I like my home and my business together. Some people, if they work from home, they never get any work done, or they never stop working. And I don't have that problem. I'm very good at compartmentalizing. It's like the last client leaves for the day, I close the door, I'm at home. Or I'm working on a book. I just, I turn on the TV and I'm at the computer writing my book. And I enjoy it. Whereas when it was separate, you go home, you're like, well, I have my laptop. I can like work on the book, let's say from the laptop, but let me have dinner first. And then you get out of work mode. Or I do. I think I would have been one of those people, old school, like where you have the store downstairs and you live upstairs. I would love that. I closed Ramy Spa in like 2014 or 15 and went back to a home office, basically like a salon in my home. I've done that ever since. About 5 years ago, I pulled out of all the brick and mortar stores. I'm exclusively online now and at my own studio. Obviously clients come here, they can buy the product here as well, but I'm primarily online now.
And you did that before the pandemic where you would have had to been online anyway.
So timely. It was
wow.
Insane. It was just kind of lucky in a weird way. I'm very fortunate in that I've been doing it for 26 years. Over those years, I was sold in Sephora, at Bergdorf, Lord & Taylor, a ton of boutiques around the country. I think most importantly, I did QVC for several years.
Right.
And that built the audience, like people that discovered me on QVC years later are still shopping on my website. So I'm very fortunate, I feel, that like I can sort of coast a little bit. Up until the pandemic, I was always chasing the business. You want new clients, you want new customers for the products, and I was always pursuing it. And now I have to be honest, I'm not proud of it, but I don't pursue new business. I have my existing clients that come, I do get some new people that discover me online. I make my living. I have my audience and my following, and it's been great. I don't even advertise. This is going back like 10, 15 years ago. Someone emailed me and they said, I love your website, but I really think like your homepage could be improved upon. And I'm a designer, of course. I won't charge you anything, but I'd like to send you 3 potential, homepage designs. And if you like one, I like your products, just send me like, a bunch of your products. And I was like, okay, I'll try this. And she sent me 3 designs that each one was better than the next. And there was one that I really loved. And I said, okay, I like this one. And, I think she put it up on my site for me. And I said, now I'm going to honor our agreement. I want to send you a bunch of products. Would you mind sending me a picture of yourself so that I could see, I want to make sure I'm sending her like the right colors and, and she said, oh, I don't think I should send you a picture because I'm only 13 years old.
Oh,
God.
I wrote back, I was like, do not send me a picture. And I just sent her like a box of like everything.
We have a friend who is a reporter with Fox 5. He does his own makeup. These reporters are all doing their own makeup and they do it at their desks and they do their own hair at the desk and then they go and they report. It's hysterical.
I've taught classes at Hunter College. They bring me in to teach the journalism students how to do camera-ready makeup. I've done it a few times now. I used to go to ABC television and do all the news anchors makeup, like do like a day that was like just a makeup lesson for everyone. They really know their stuff, I'll tell you. I remember there was one Nancy Liu and she was like ABC News. So she came in and she was wearing a lipstick that I wouldn't recommend for anybody. It was like, it looked like fluorescent hot pink, great grandmother's, fluorescent pink lipstick. In person, it just looked terrible. And she came in and asked me my opinion of this lipstick. And I said, everything else looks great, but I think you can do better than this lip color. It's a little too much. It's a little too fluorescent. And she said, it looks too much in person, but if you watch the screen when I go on camera, it looks really good on camera. So I was really curious, just for my own knowledge, to see if she was right or not. And she was absolutely right. It looked terrific on camera. It looked like just like a standard lipstick. It didn't look like it looked in person. In person, it looked costumey. On camera, it looked like she was wearing like a subtle, natural lipstick. The only people that get a makeup artist are like the Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer, but all the news anchors, like Eyewitness News, they all do it themselves. But they have to learn how to do it correctly. I did makeovers for all the newswomen of MSNBC. And I felt like it was very sexist because they only had us doing all the women that are on camera, none of the men. And the men, if you ever watch MSNBC, they're wearing like crazy ties. It's like a thing, but they really could use a little fashion advice. They had Robert Verdi going through these women's wardrobes and telling them how to dress better for the camera. They had a very high-end salon redoing their hair. And they had me doing their eyebrows and makeup. Some of them needed the help and welcomed it, but a lot of them were very resentful. And I think rightfully so. Just it felt very sexist to me, like why only the women have to do it. And there was one anchor who, she had small eyes and she came in wearing very heavy false eyelashes where you couldn't even see her eyes on camera. And I showed her how not to do that. And like how to do it better and make, where you could see her eyes and where she looked great. And she embraced it for like 5 minutes. And then a year later, I was flipping through the channel and I saw she went back to her old look. I've done 2 books. The first one I wrote while I was going through treatment. I did a makeup and beauty book for people living with cancer. Again, it was something that gave purpose to what I was going through, and I'm very proud of it. And then it was so much work for me, and the editing was really like the publisher didn't know what they wanted, and I went through the whole editing process, and then they said, no, we don't like it. Let's start with your original manuscript and start all over again. So it was a lot of work, but for a good purpose. After it was done, I was very happy, but I did not want to do another book. And God bless her, my literary agent chased me for literally 10 years to do another book. She wanted me to do a makeup book for everyone that's not just geared towards cancer patients. And I just didn't want to do it. I was like, I'm busy. I don't want, it's
Right.
a big undertaking. And she cajoled me into coming up with a title. And I liked the title so much that it inspired the book.
Perry came up with a title years ago. She's like, well, now I have to write a book. She has names for all her chapters. Now she has to do the inside.
My last book called How to Fake Real Beauty. And that's the book that's like for everyone. The TV is near my desk. And I would have to turn on America's Next Top Model to be writing. That's what I don't know why it just got me in the zone for the book. Every time I had to have that on in order to write my manuscript. People get into a rut. I think I wrote about it in the book. Like a woman will be saying to me that I was told I should never wear coral lipstick. And it's usually just as I'm about to apply a coral lipstick.
Yeah.
And why? Because 25 years earlier, she had her makeup done or she had her colors done.
Right.
And she was told to never wear coral. I remember this actually happened, and I said to the woman, the products have changed. Colors are not as opaque as they used to be, like lipsticks, and you've changed, and styles have changed. And just because maybe it was true 25 years ago, it doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment. And maybe it would look great on you now. And so it's very important, I think, every few years to get a refresher. And just, you might learn a new technique or discover a new product or color that you didn't know about, that you're going to love.
So you're always learning because the business is always evolving.
Constantly. I remember even when I was in beauty school in Sydney, there was a girl in the class with me, a young woman, and she was a flight attendant by profession at the time. And I said, oh, do you want to be a makeup artist also? And she said, no. And she said, I like being a flight attendant. I'm like, oh, then why are you here? And she said, every few years I go to a beauty school and I get a lesson because I like to discover new things. And I said, you know what? You're going to be beautiful the rest of your life.
And one thing in particular that you would like someone to know that you don't know already.
A fun fact?
I started about 5 years ago. And it's something I had always wanted to do, but never had the guts to do. Even in my 20s, I wanted to do it, and I just was too scared. And that is to do stand-up comedy. Even in my 20s, I'd have a glass of wine at a party, and people would be like, you're so funny, you should do stand-up. And a guy came to me and he said, I own a comedy club. Here's my business card. We have open mic every Wednesday. Just come on in and try it out. And I never had the courage to go. I carried that business card for 20 years in my wallet. And I said, the only way I'll be able to get up to the mic is if I'm an alcoholic, because I would need like 2 vodka sodas in order to have the courage to go up there. But I really wanted to do it. And then over the years, I knew Joan Rivers. And she told me, she said, you should do stand-up. You're very quick. You would be great at stand-up. And that was the greatest compliment I ever had coming from her. And I still didn't have the courage to attempt it. And then 6 years ago, my mother passed away. And that was my moment where I was like, first of all, my mother was only 20 years older than me. So it made me feel like, we're not here forever. If I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And the other thing was, it gave me something to focus on outside of my grief, because I was so devastated at my mother's passing. And so I have friends who are professional comedians, and they told me who to take a class with. And they said, if you take a class with this guy, you're going to finish the class doing stand-up. And I was like, I don't think so, but I'll take the class. And it was true. When I finished the course, the graduation is you perform at the Comedy Cellar. And I started doing stand-up all over Manhattan. It was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, and the most thrilling thing I've ever done in my life. And I loved it. And I started performing all over the city. Everything was going great. And then the pandemic happened. So it shut everything down. I did a couple of appearances via Zoom, which is very tough because they mute the audience. So
no feedback.
You can't tell, right, if the jokes are landing or not. You're like, hello, is this thing on? I've done 1 or 2 performances since the pandemic, but I haven't performed in about a year. And I get invites from comedy clubs all over the city. I could perform every Friday night if I wanted to. And I just haven't been able to just dive in again, but I plan to. That's my New Year's resolution for this year, is to start up again. When it goes well, it's the greatest high. It's just like a dream come true, really. My father's going through Alzheimer's and dementia. It's incredibly difficult and challenging. But even in that scenario, there are so many funny things. We find ourselves laughing a lot. My father will start laughing. Like, he'll call me and I'll be like, hi, Dad. And he's like, why did I call you? And I'm like, nobody knows. And we'll just start laughing. And he's like, okay, when I remember, I'll call you back. You have to laugh. A good attitude. I learned it, as we said earlier, from my mother. But I feel like I'm lucky that I just innately have also that kind of character like she had, where I'm just generally positive. Even when things are bad. It's not like I don't get sad or upset when bad things happen, but my general demeanor is I'm sort of happy-go-lucky. And I feel like that helps so much in life. It helps you get through so much, to find the humor and the positivity is so important.